This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic. What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is June 8th, 2023. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by my co-host, Luke Sylvia. Luke, how are you, my friend?
Wonderful. Friday, going to Georgia for a wedding, and then going from Georgia to the beach. It's Atlanta, Kev,
Okay.
Yeah, it's Atlanta. I would have hit you up. And then we're going to the beach on Sunday for the week, New Smyrna. So you guys actually shows next week will be piloted by yourself, Jonathan, and old producer Kevy for a couple episodes.
And yeah, I didn't know the Georgia thing was coming. I don't think
me
Kevin
neither.
knew either, so he kind of jumped in before I got the chance to introduce him. But producer Kevin on the show, per 5 million requests to get him on the show each week. And here he is. What's up, Kev? How are you?
Gentlemen, glad to be back. Ladies and gentlemen who are viewing or listening to this episode, glad to be back. First time on in several weeks, but glad to talk about some off-season and draft stuff with you guys.
Speaking of draft stuff, quick announcement here. Coming up on the 22nd, so the draft is 2 weeks from today as you're listening to this, if you're listening to it on Thursday the 8th. So the 22nd at 6:30 is when the doors are going to open at Amway Center, downtown Orlando. The Magic are hosting this year's draft party. I don't know how many more of these we're going to have, as the team should be picking later and later in the first round as the next years come and go. But we'll be there hanging out. The draft, I believe, starts at 7 o'clock. So make sure that you guys go to orlandomagic.com or in your Orlando Magic app to reserve your free tickets. It is free to get in, but you do need a ticket to get in. So make sure you go and reserve that. I think each individual person can reserve up to 4. So we'll be there hanging out, of course. Looking forward to seeing all of you. So go ahead and get those tickets, and then we'll see you June 22nd. It's weird that we're just 2 weeks away from the draft, gentlemen.
Yeah, it feels like we talk. I don't remember. Was that before we talked with Josh or after or during? I mean, but we had essentially just said how crazy it seems that it's already been we're a third of the way through this off season, and also how equally crazy it is that there's teams still playing basketball. We said that and we're like, man, it gives me a lot to look forward to. Like, my team can just be playing later, meaning the offseason gets shorter and shorter. That's what I'm looking forward to most.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's like a whole second season, like when you get in these playoffs, man. And it's crazy. There's only 2 teams left. And yeah, it's weird thinking back to the lottery, May 15th, 16th, whatever it was. And I was like, man, the draft is so far away. And now we're over halfway there. Draft in 2 weeks. Let's go. I'm excited.
Yeah, it felt last year like the pre-draft process took a lot longer, and I contribute that to just having so many more possibilities this year in the draft. Like, do we keep both picks? Do we trade both picks? Do we keep one pick and trade the other? Do we keep 6 and trade 11? Do we trade players and picks for a star? Like, if we keep both picks, there's a million different directions we could go in selecting players. So yeah, it's gone by a lot faster. And today I realized, like, wow, like the Magic last played almost 2 months ago now. And that puts us a third of the way through the offseason. And we're going to be right into the draft, right into Summer League. And then, of course, August is always super, super dead. And then at the end of September, beginning of October, like, we'll have media day and right into training camp.
It's super dead, except for I have to bring it up because I made it a big deal last year for no reason at all. It's not super dead because my birthday is in August. But so August 29th, you guys have like the dead of August to really plan what you're going to get me. It's awesome. Honestly, Jonathan, when you said that,
we also have FIBA World Cup.
That's
I
what I was
forgot
going
about
to
that.
say. Yep.
Yeah.
But what I was going to add was that you talk about how last time it felt like so much longer leading up to the draft. it just really hit me how much longer it really did feel. Because it was excruciating just week after week talking about 3 dudes, and that was it. It has been so much better. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It's been so much better. Obviously, would not trade anything for Paolo Banchero, and for that time and the draft and whatever. But man, it has flown by considerably compared to this time last year.
Imagine how miserable we'd be if we got number 1.
Yeah. You'd just be talking about Wemby. We'd just be the show wouldn't even happen. We would just throw up Wemby highlights.
Those poor Spurs fans, they just know for 6 weeks that they're drafting Victor Wembanyama.
Oh, poor guys.
All right, let's reveal the real reason that Kevin Tucker is on the show tonight. Or today, rather. If you're on social media, you may already know about this, but this is something that is really, first of all, it has our full support. Like, we're super excited about this, but it was producer Kevin's idea, and it is like very much producer Kevin's baby. Next regular season, after every single Magic game, we're going to have a live post-game show. We're going to broadcast on YouTube, and 95% of the time, it's going to be hosted by none other than producer Kevin Tucker. And it's an awesome thing that we're doing, bringing more content to the community. And what I think is so cool about it, Kevin, is that fans are going to be able to interact with each show and give their opinion on what they just watched each night.
Yeah, I'm super, super pumped about it. I think this is a really good time to start going into this venture with, the future of this team, and hopefully this coming up, season going to be so much more fun and more wins and all that kind of stuff. But we kind of did a test run of this of sorts. Like, some of you tuned into our 300th episode live, which was really fun. But if you were there, you saw it was a totally live, interactive show with comments and YouTube chats and all that kind of stuff. And so that's the idea after each and every Magic game this year. Something short, 20, 30 minutes, but kind of reacting to the game and getting fans involved. Like, that's a big thing we're pushing for this season. But yeah, I'm super pumped. It's going to be a lot. 82 games is no joke, but it's going to be a lot of fun, especially getting to do it with Magic fans every step of the way.
And I think we all know how electric it is just right after a Magic game. And honestly, whether it's a win or a loss, just how active this community is. So that's a big reason, too, that's happening. And like you touched on, Kev, but in the 300th episode in that live stream, I mean, how many concurrent people at one time do we have in there? Was it over 200, Kevin? I can't remember the exact, but it was a good amount of you guys. And so I can only imagine for right after a Magic game, how many people, are able to flood into the comments, give your thoughts. Kevin and, from time to time, Jonathan and I on there, and then probably some other guests along the way with you, Kevin.
For sure.
And able to just pick out your comments. And man, I'm just super pumped for it. I know that our buddies over at Nick's Film School, Blue Wire family, shout out. They do a lot of this type of stuff, right? They're doing live post games. They do pre-games, previews with their producer. So just kind of going to be cool to see Kevin get to step into the role of not just producer, but hosting really his own show within the 6-man show. So super pumped for it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great just to get fans more engaged in the conversation. Because right now, we'll still be I'll do my 60-second, or they've kind of grown last season a minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever, depending on what is happening. So we'll still have that kind of short form type of content. But for those of you that want to hear on a essentially daily basis now, in one way or another, you're probably going to hear us talking about the Orlando Magic. If it's not the Monday show or the Thursday show, if there's a game Tuesday or Wednesday or Friday or Saturday, Sunday, you're going to have so much more Magic content from us.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. The idea behind this is not just more content, but a different flavor too. That's the whole idea with it being shorter, instant reactions to games, getting you involved as listeners, and then also just a different host. It's a different voice, different perspective, and so that way, obviously, the normal Monday, Thursday shows absolutely not going away. That's the backbone of who we are and what we do. But just something different, something added to it to react to all the different games. But yeah, I'm beyond excited. It should be fun.
And last thing I want to add there. Sorry, Jonathan. The last thing I was going to add here was just that I know the listeners, people that listen, consume on audio platforms, are wondering, what if I prefer
That's where I
audio?
was
I want
going.
something to listen to on the way to work. Sorry, Jonathan.
No.
But yeah, so you're going to have something to listen to. We're going to upload this to the audio platforms, and you won't have to worry about that. Because I know there's people watch the game and they're like, man, I can't wait to go to sleep and then wake up and listen to the episode or whatever it is, because that's how I am, truthfully. So I'm a big sleep guy. So I watch the game. I want to go to bed. Don't worry. It'll be there on YouTube again, and then it also will be on those audio platforms.
So if you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/the Six Man Show now and go ahead and subscribe. And then also be sure on our channel to ring the little notification bell. That way, every time that we post new episodes, so when those come out in the mornings, you'll be notified of that. And when Kevin goes live after games, you'll be notified as well. So make sure that you subscribe, ring the notification bell, and you guys engaging with those streams is going to be huge, comments and everything like that, just to help continue to grow the channel, grow the community. Like Luke pointed out, it's still going to be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to it. So if you don't catch it live, you'll be able to catch that afterwards. Just really looking forward to that. And the good news is, I don't think we're ready to announce the other content that we have planned for next season, but this isn't going to be the last thing that we are adding for next season.
We're going to be everywhere. We're going to be you're not going to be able to turn around as a Magic fan and not see the Six Man Show. We're going to be everywhere.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to that. So just trying to bring other flavors so that it's not just Jonathan and Luke, the same old song and dance all the time, to get other perspective and an emphasis on more, fan involvement as well is what we're looking for next year. So be on the lookout for that. But super excited. No producer Kevin is going to kill it. Looking forward to joining those, with Luke and with Kevin sometimes and seeing what guests we're able to get on those. I just know it's going to be a lot of fun. And what's probably going to happen, like I know Kevin is going to do this, but I'll probably just be sitting there watching these, like commenting most of the time anyway. So really looking forward to these, Kev. All right, a little bit of a NBA Finals update as we talk about our arch nemesis, the Miami Heat, playing against the Denver Nuggets. Right now, they are in Game 3. The series is tied 1 game apiece with 6 minutes, 20 seconds to go in the second quarter. Denver is up 1. What did you guys think of Game 2, and how do you feel about this series in general at this point?
Well, obviously didn't enjoy how Game 2 ended. I think as the series as a whole, especially after Game 1, the Nuggets obviously ran away with that one. It felt like, okay, Denver is who we thought they were. Okay, this is going to be easy. And unfortunately, Miami did what Miami has done this entire postseason. And whenever you think they're out, they find a way, which is really annoying. Like it's gross. It's really gross. But I still feel good about the Nuggets. I think hopefully they'll correct some of the things. Obviously, we haven't got to watch a second of this game tonight because, we've been talking and interviewing Josh and everything. But hopefully they've corrected some of the things from Game 2 and can grab it on the road and secure home court advantage again.
As you guys know, I love to keep up with the betting lines. I think the betting lines are super telling when it comes to a series. The crazy thing to me so far in terms of the betting lines, Denver has been favored by like 8 to 9 points in games 1 and 2. Heading to tonight back in Miami, typically, for those that don't know, when it goes back to the home place, what you can usually infer is that the spread will be impacted by about 3 points, 3 to 3.5 points, right? Tonight in this game, Miami was only a 3.5 point dog. So about a 5-point swing at that point, at that rate. So tells you Vegas might be buying in a little bit to the Miami win in Game 2. And but it's still, Denver's going to probably be favored every game regardless. But as Miami has shown us, it doesn't matter who's favored in every game, because I would highly doubt that they've been favored in the majority of these games that they've played in so far in the playoffs. So, and they're in the NBA Finals. Also, they got Messi today. In Miami, why do they get to have nice things? I'm ready for Orlando to have nice things. I have a buddy. I'm getting off on a tangent. I apologize. I have a buddy. His name's Ryan, and he's an Orlando City fan, but he's a Miami Heat fan. And he had the gall.
What a loser.
He had the gall today to text me. I'm going to pull it up. He had the gall today.
Is this the Ryan I was talking to on Saturday?
It is. Yes.
Oh, my.
He said
Wow.
He said this to me. I wish, and he's talking about Orlando City, but we know how we'll take this. I wish Orlando was a big market and could get sick players. Like, shut up. You have no idea. It's ironic that he, as a Heat fan who should be a Miami soccer fan at that rate, could say such a thing to me. But yeah, so the rich get richer there down in Miami.
Well, I am still hoping that like this Cinderella story will come to an end. Like I just watched Caleb Martin out of the corner of my eye have his own 8-0 run. Like, Caleb Martin, who do you think you are? All right, like these last 2 rounds of the playoffs, the kid's playing like an all-star. Like just relax. Like you know who you are. This playoff series is going to come and go, and next year we'll be like, oh my gosh, look at Caleb Martin. Remember we watched him in the playoffs? We thought this guy was going to be like incredible. Like I'm really just sick of it. Like Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, like everybody just chill out a little bit with the 3-point shooting. Like the almost 50% in game 2, just completely unnecessary. And everybody else on Denver,
nobody even knew how to shoot a 3 in the regular season on
They're
Miami.
one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league all season. And now the last 2 months, they are just like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. It just good things happen to bad people. I don't understand. I don't know why, but here we are. Like they should have lost to the Bucks. They definitely should have lost to the Celtics. Yeah. I'm still picking Denver in 5, which was my original prediction. Even if it goes 7, as long as they lose, I will be okay. Because if they win, I'll never forget it, and Kevin will never forgive me for rooting for the Heat against the Bulls in the play-in.
Yep, that
I was
mistake
rooting
number
for
1.
our draft lottery odds.
That is the reason we are in this situation right now. You can blame Jonathan. The other thing I was going to say, the last thing I'll say about this stupid series and stupid team, I don't like to talk about them. The stat that blew my mind was the quarter breakdown. I don't remember what the first 3 quarters were, but they were in the negative. The Heat were in the negative in point differential in quarters 1, 2, and 3 over the course of the whole playoffs. In the fourth quarter, they are plus 90 points in the fourth quarter, which means that's over 100 point difference between 1, 2, and 3 versus quarter 4. Insane what they've done in fourth quarters, and it makes me sick.
Yeah, screw them. All right, let's talk about something a little bit more exciting. Let's talk about the Orlando Magic. So a couple days ago, as you're listening to this, I believe it was Tuesday that this report came out from Sean Devney. He reported that the Magic are interested in Gary Trent Jr. and the Celtics' Grant Williams this year in free agency. He said that he talked to an Eastern Conference executive, and about Gary Trent, he had to say he'd be a good bet as their top priority in free agency, but that's if they want to go all in. And then speaking to a Western Conference executive talking about Grant Williams, he said he is 24. He has proven his chops on both ends. You can't coach that kind of experience. He's got it. He's a perfect fit there. You want to become a playoff team. He is the kind of guy they'd want, but Orlando would have to overpay to get him, and it is tough to expect a team to do that. Obviously, if you are Williams, you want to see the Magic being aggressive in the market. Luke, what are your thoughts on this report, the opinions of these executives, and then just kind of what you think about those guys and the Magic having a marriage this free agency period?
The only thing those executives, the only difference between me and these executives is that they hold a higher, more authoritative role in their organization. We know the same thing. We're going off because guess what, Jonathan? What have you and I have been saying? We've been saying this team needs to add shooting, right? Pure speculation that the Magic are going to go get shooters, but there's a good chance that we're right. We hope that we're right. Much like these executives hope they're right by suggesting that Grant Williams and Gary Trent Jr. are in the sights of the Magic. I say this because Grant Williams shoots almost 4 threes a game, 39.5% from 3. Gary Trent Jr. this past year almost 7 attempts a game, 36.9% from 3. That's the main denominator, like the common denominator for the guys that are being suggested is 3-point shooting. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I don't like that only 3-point shooters are being linked to us right now. Whether they know what they're talking about or not, I still like to know that, like, oh, our take isn't bad, that the Magic absolutely need to add 3-point shooting. But also, in the off chance that they happen to share a drink with Weltman or Hammond, Hammond gets to talking. I don't want us to lose sight of that. Hammond can get to talking. So maybe that's not even the conversation. Maybe the conversation wasn't who are you targeting, right? That might be too crazy. But it might have been, yeah, we need to add some shooting this off season, yada yada. Do you want, what kind of whiskey do you want? You know what I'm saying? So I'm hoping that is the case. I don't hate these reports. I really don't, because both dudes can shoot the lights out of the ball. So I'm okay with that from that standpoint. I don't know if I'm crazy about Grant, but you know.
Yeah, I think for me, it kind of goes back to, I guess the what do they call those? The exit interviews at the end of the season, where they asked Jeff Weltman kind of some general offseason questions. What are you hoping to do this year? And he gave the most explicit answer we've ever seen from Jeff Weltman when he said, we need to add shooting. Like, for him to say that, I remember it was like, what's going on with this guy? Did he actually just say that? Which was crazy, because normally it's just like, we want to get better, and we're always looking to develop. All the generic broad statements that Weltman has been obviously known for. But for him to come out and just straight up say, well, we need to add shooting. We were one of the worst shooting teams in the league. So that was surprising, but it did kind of set the table for the rest of this offseason. So like you said, Luke, it could just be spouting out things that everybody knows. We were a terrible shooting team. We need to get better. But there may be conversations, behind closed doors. As for these two particular guys, I'm kind of with you, Luke. I'm okay with both of them. Obviously, I don't think we're going to grab both of them, but I think both of them would be an interesting fit in Orlando. I would prefer Gary Trent Jr. Of the two, but they're both interesting guys, and I think they could have a fit potentially here in Orlando.
I think if you just kind of look like historically, like guys who are in a similar situation to Grant Williams, like, pretty important role player on a championship contending team. Once they hit free agency, this might be a guy that's looking for a bigger role, in Grant Williams. So when they're talking about the part, this is a guy that you may have to overpay. You may have to give him starter money, and he may be looking for a role that's a little bit bigger than what he had in Boston. He may be looking to start for a team. And if that's the case, sorry, Grant, Orlando is just not the place for you. I don't know if you've heard, we have a guy named Paolo Banchero and his good buddy Franz Wagner. So I'm just really not that interested in that, because, I mean, if not, like, why not just stay in Boston? Like, if he's looking to get paid more money, and that's going to come with more responsibilities is going to come with a bigger role. Gary Trent is definitely the name that intrigues me a bit more. But that's another guy that I think if you go out and you pay him, that's your starting two guard next season.
Well, so the thing is, as far as their contracts go, right? Grant Williams is a little bit more cut and dried to the fact of like maybe a little bit more believable, just because he's a restricted free agent, right? And when it comes to this summer, the Magic can just try to outbid Boston. Essentially, Boston can kind of be like, "Oh, that's too rich for our blood, and you guys can take him." Gary Trent Jr. is a little trickier because Gary Trent Jr. has a player option. So are you able, like, is Gary Trent going to really want to commit to this Magic team? And it all comes down to money and fit and culture. Thankfully, I think the Magic have the culture. They've got the money. You just got to hope Gary Trent wants to be a part of this Magic team, because he's not technically, unrestricted until next offseason, but he does have that player option coming into this offseason.
Yeah, just looking at like the Raptors and talking about Gary Trent. So next year he has a player option for $18.5 million in what is not really a loaded free agent class. I would not be shocked at all to see him decline that and hit the open market, maybe looking for greener pastures. Toronto has not been kind of living up to their expectation. Now Nick Nurse is gone. They're going to be bringing in a new head coach. So maybe he sees this as an opportunity to bounce. What I really want everyone to take from this, though, Luke, you talked about how these execs probably know about as much as we do. even if these end up being true, right? I don't want people getting like super excited about these because we've seen this time and time again where there are reports the Magic are tied to this guy, they're interested in this guy. They don't end up here. We need to look as far as the last draft cycle with Jabari Smith Jr. Nobody really knows what the Magic are going to do until they do it. So although there is some legitimacy to these guys being good fits, I don't want people to start getting excited that, all right, they're definitely going in and trying to sign these guys in free agency.
The other thing to add too, the last thing I'll add about these guys and the talk of the execs and things of that nature is that maybe they know or they think that, if the Magic are going to add shooters, they don't necessarily need like a 28, 29-year-old vet in order to add it, or 27. Both of these guys are 24. So I do like that. I like that there seems to be kind of a type, right? Shooters, young, can grow with the team. I don't hate it at all. Obviously, as all of us would, prefer Gary Trent Jr., but I think it'll be a little bit tougher to swing him as compared to Grant Williams. But I do definitely see your point, Jonathan, and I agree with it that Gary Trent Jr. could see it's a little weaker of the free agency class. Why not test the water, see, these teams like the Magic who have more to give this offseason, see if they're willing to do it with Gary Trent Jr. I wouldn't hate it at all if they overpaid a little bit for him.
Sticking with the topic of free agents, I don't even know if we can label this guy a free agent, but Chris Paul reportedly is going to be waived by the Phoenix Suns. Now, I thought I understood what the hell waiving a player meant, but apparently a guy making too much money can just be waived, clear the waivers, and then sign back with his current team. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. Like, to me, that's just something about that doesn't seem right. Maybe it should, but it really doesn't. But I posed the question on Twitter about Chris Paul, and I did this more so with the thinking in mind that you would sign him to some kind of veteran minimum. I don't see why he would do that here in Orlando. I'm sure he still wants to ring chase, so to speak. But I put the poll on Twitter, would you be interested in bringing in Chris Paul as sort of a mentor to some of these young guys? And as it stands right now at 9:37 p.m. Wednesday night, we have 314 votes. 56.4% of the vote is for no. 43.6% of the vote is yes. Were you guys surprised by these results at all? And then where do you fall with Chris Paul in being a Magic?
I wasn't surprised because I also voted no. Right. So maybe controversial opinion here. I don't know, man. We've talked about this a little bit like off air. I'm just not ready for this team to make any kind of jump. And I understand the notion of Chris Paul coming just as a mentor or whatever to our young guys, which from that standpoint, I would be cool with. But at the same time, when you bring someone like Chris Paul in, like the expectations just instantly go up. Even though he's not who he once was, he's still Chris Paul, and that name carries weight. And I'm not ready for this team to be, kind of subject to that, if that makes sense. Like, I'm very much a fan of the long-term game here, like slow and steady. We're not trying to go all in too early. And, but then, I want the team to grow, basically. I'm afraid this would rush that process too much. So on paper, it looks nice, but in reality, I decided to say no.
I don't know where I fall, to be honest. Chris Paul, and like Kev said, like the name carries weight, but not only does the name carry weight, he's still a good basketball player. Like, he, even despite being 38 years old, he's averaged last season in 60 games, 59 games, 14 points a game, 8.9 assists and 1.9 turnovers. That's absurd to me. The guy's been nicknamed Point God, so I'm not too surprised. But 37.5% from three on 4.5 threes a game, like, still a respectable basketball player. And he has been playing the same amount of minutes every year since 2015. 32 minutes a game is where he's kind of been falling. Even last year, as really majority of the year, I think, being 37. But, it's just all about fit at this point. And the Magic have their guys. The truth of the matter is, he's not coming to Orlando. Like there's just that's the truth of the matter here, right? Like he was making 30 million, right? Or 28.4 million last year. And no, I don't know the last guy that got paid that much money was looked at the star that he is or was, and then jump ship designed for a vet minimum, right? So for a non-contender,
At least not to a contender,
right? Not to a non-contender is what I was getting at, and like it's just an unrealistic thing, but it is fun to think about. It's fun that this is even a poll you could put out there, because in past years we'd be like yes, he's even in today's time he's not coming, but at the same time we know that we're not far away from these conversations being a reality. We're a couple years probably away from like that big star that's late in his career come on just to be a vet presence and be with the Magic as he ring chases. So, which is crazy to think about, but also awesome.
Yeah, I think really like my ideal Chris Paul in Orlando scenario is like Atlanta Hawks Vince Carter, where he doesn't really have a huge role on the floor, like really is just there to mentor. And I think Vince Carter's personality is probably a bit better suited for that kind of role where maybe Chris Paul isn't. But when I posed the poll and posed the question, that's more of what I was thinking. I'm not talking about Chris Paul coming in and being like our backup point guard, although if you were to make that kind of signing, Luke, to your point, he still is good enough to be like a backup. I don't think that you would want him in the starting lineup with Paolo and Franz and really taking the ball out of their hands. Because for most of the season, like in Phoenix, it's like Devin Booker and Chris Paul playing like my turn, your turn kind of thing, where it's not necessarily shots, but like, okay, this position, Booker's going to initiate the offense, probably get a pretty good shot. This possession, Chris Paul is going to initiate the offense, maybe get a good shot for himself, probably get a good shot for someone else. I just don't see that in the starting lineup. And for all of the reasons that you both have listed, it's not going to happen. And admittedly, it's the off season. I was fishing for a little bit of social media content, get everybody's minds going and kind of get the juices flowing. So Chris Paul is not coming to Orlando, but I thought it was a fun conversation to be had. But I gotta say, I did expect more people to be on board. Maybe I should have added a bit more of the context in which I was thinking about this. Maybe people just thought like, hey, are we going to bring in Chris Paul to be our backup point guard? And no, most people would not be interested in that. To Kevin's point, Chris Paul is still good enough and that name still carries enough weight that the expectation is like, oh, he's going to do to the Magic what he did to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and elevate them, the way that they were able to do there. So, but I at least thought that was a fun conversation. Speaking of fun conversations, we did have a really fun conversation with a writer and digital content manager from OrlandoMagic.com, our buddy Josh Cohen. We're going to get to that conversation in just a moment. But before we do that, we need to shout out the folks that help financially support every episode. And talking about this postgame show definitely would not be possible without our patrons. So really, really appreciate our patrons. If you'd like to join our community, you can find us at patreon.com/the6man show, where you can help support the show for as little as $2 a month. We have additional tiers with additional benefits. One of those being our Elite and Hall of Fame tier patrons. We shout them out on every single episode, which I'll go ahead and start with the Court Cousins, Drew Gooden, Carmen, my wife Carmen. No, Armin. Armin is not my wife. Armin is definitely not my wife. Carson Tulo, Normal, Magic Player History, Gabe Gaines, Magic Static. Wiffle switched up the name to Magic Static. I like that. Michael Martin, Jamel Miller. You guys remember Static Shock? I loved that show as a kid. Magic Static brings Static Shock to mind. Michael Salapong, The Distract, Donkey Punch Dave, Paolo and Franz's Warmth, Pierre A., Nostalgia and M&M's, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey, Eduardo Sanchez, Drum, Daniel, Dodo 15, Bobby Skinner, Goody 93, Teddy Sylvia, Eric Lopez, Fuchsia, Wanderado, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Hosea Squealing, Destined for Greatness, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Ty Mr. TV, Joe Rothfuss, ESPN Really Sucks, Gear 95 Shred, Junior Bruce, Half Freakin', Shahin 177, Bobby the Dawn, Himlo Ban Himro, RM Prof 221, Ray Pastrana, Magic Kid 714, Spank Too Hard, Soft Taco Jesse, Johnny B. Will you guys stop laughing? Fuego Nando, Victor Cologne, Phantom Wolf 72, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampy, Random Hustle, Only Franz, Maria, Keith Wallace, and Fritz. A big thank you to all of our patrons. Again, you can find us at patreon.com/The Six Man Show. Luke, is there something that you would like to share with the class?
No. Kevin started it. All right. Kevin started it.
Hey, we have some creative patrons. That's all I'm going to say. All right.
We definitely do. All right, let's get into the conversation with our good buddy, Josh Cohen. All right, y'all, a very special guest joining the show. We haven't talked to this man since last year during the pre-draft process, but he's a writer and digital content manager for OrlandoMagic.com. Our friend, Josh Cohen. Josh, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks to both of you for having me aboard. Always appreciate it. And yeah, I can't believe it's already been a year since I was last on this show. But as we were talking off air, time just keeps flying by. And I can't believe we're 2 weeks away from the draft.
Yeah, 2 weeks away from the draft still, smack dab in the middle of the NBA Finals. We're recording this just after 8 o'clock on Wednesday. Game 3 is getting ready to tip off here in about a half hour. Josh, who are you rooting for in these NBA Finals?
I hope it's obvious, but of course, Denver.
Okay, good.
Jonathan would have closed out the Zoom right there.
Yeah, totally.
I wouldn't. Not to Josh.
Let the best team win, though, of course.
Yeah.
It's always a fair game, but Denver is the team that I would love to see win it. I love their coaching staff. Of course, Jokic is so exciting to watch. Jamal Murray's been incredible. So, and you got to still root for Aaron Gordon, right? And Jeff Green, too, another former Magic player. Always got to root for those guys.
Jeff Green. I met Jeff Green at a 2017 season ticket holder event. And I was like, Jeff, we're making the playoffs this year, right? And he goes, I promise. Looked me dead straight in my face and just lied. He's like, I promise we're making the playoffs. We did not make the playoffs that year.
You got to love the optimism, though.
Yes. Yeah.
A glass half full approach is always the right way to go, I think.
Imagine he looked at you and he was like, no.
Right. Then you have a true story, but that would be even more fascinating. But I'm glad he kept it positive.
At that same ticket holder event, DJ Augustine was set up at like a little Papa Shot station, and I played DJ Augustine one-on-one, and we were tied with like 1 second left. He misses his shot as I'm going to take mine, and in true DJ Augustine fashion, grabbed my shoulder and almost pulled me to the ground so that we ended up tying, and I could not win. I'll never forgive DJ for that, but he made up for it with that game one gamer against the Raptors.
That's hilarious.
So
DJ
Josh,
was good like that. DJ was a lot of fun.
Great guy. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I could have been in the NBA. Like when I stood next to DJ, it became a little bit more realistic for me.
If it was Papa Shot, you might have been in. You might as well have been an NBA player.
Yeah. So Josh, again, it's been a year since we've talked. Since then, the Magic drafted Paolo Banchero #1 overall. Had a what I and Luke and a lot of people consider a really successful season, even given the way that the Magic started the year. Well, especially the way that the Magic started the year. So just kind of give us your opinion on Paolo's rookie season and this overall, just this last season for the Magic.
Well, as you alluded to, Paolo got off to a tremendous start. Those first 6 games where he scored over 20 points was pretty mesmerizing. Surprising, probably not shocking, though, just from the standpoint of we knew that he could be an electric scorer right out of the game. He's very polished coming out of Duke. He's probably the most polished prospect in last year's draft. And I think he proved that he was at least ready to contribute right away at the NBA level. And he continued to showcase a variety of different elements to his game as the season went on. And I think the number one thing that got better and better as the year went on was his playmaking. And I think this is the most critical part for Paolo going forward. We know that he's going to score a lot. We just don't know if he's going to be efficient. And we'll find that out at a later date. If you're trying to compare him to the all-time great scorers, efficiency is usually what it comes down to. There's a reason why Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, Carmelo Anthony, guys like that were such electric scorers, because they reached efficiency levels that were supreme. I don't know if Paolo will ever be that efficient and that electric, but regardless of where his scoring totals finish out, I still think the most important detail of his game going forward is the playmaking. You look at, for example, Jason Tatum, and I've been bringing this up to a lot of people. the last few weeks. And I understand the Celtics fell short of their goal. But what I see from Jason Tatum is a lot of what I hope to see in Paolo. I'm not necessarily saying they're identical players. They're different in a lot of ways. I think Paolo's more power, a little less finesse, while Jason Tatum is more finesse, a little less power. And I would say Tatum's a little smoother, better catch and shoot jump shooter from the perimeter. But when you talk about some of the movements, the ball handling, the creativity, and then most importantly, the vision and the instincts when the ball's in their hands, I think are very similar, very compatible. What the Celtics did with Tatum is exactly what I think needs to happen with Paolo. And that is if he's running the show, which is exactly what happened with Tatum when they decided to move off of Kyrie Irving and Kemba Walker a couple years ago, it enabled Tatum to be handed the keys and be a playmaker from the forward spot. And if you look around the league, the best teams all have elite playmaking in the front court. Obviously, Denver with Nikola Jokic, Miami with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, the Lakers with LeBron, Giannis in Milwaukee, and now Tatum in Boston. And I truly believe, he's 6'10", Paolo. He has deceptive quickness. I wouldn't say he's blazing fast, but he has this way of manipulating defenders through various movements, which is what makes Tatum so special. And it's all about what they do when they get in the paint. And Paolo is exceptionally good at getting in the paint. And whether he decides to create for himself, draw the contact, we know he's amazing at getting to the free throw line, or once the roster fills out around him and there's more shooting and there's more cutting and he has more familiarity with the ancillary pieces on the team, I just think sky's the limit for him from an all-around standpoint. Whether he ends up scoring in the upper 20s, obviously when you think about superstars, you think of guys that put up a lot of points. To me, that's not the most important detail with him. Of course, that would be great. But I expect him, and I think he's capable of it, to be amongst the top triple-double guys in the league by the time he reaches his prime. He had one game against Miami late in the year where he fell 1 assist shy of a triple-double. He didn't end up getting one this year, but he came close a few times, and I thought those were the games where I was most impressed because he wasn't necessarily shooting the ball at a high clip, but he still found ways to get others involved. He was able to get in the paint relentlessly, and the ability to initiate contact consistently is what makes him so spectacular. I love the power and finesse blend, and I just think he's going to be one of those unique guys at his size who makes everyone around him better. And we see that from the best teams in the league right now, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I want to ask you, you talk about, the comps for Paolo. You mentioned his free throw ability to get to the free throw line. Some of Magic fans may not know, but Josh has a YouTube channel where he does player breakdowns and things of the sorts. You had one, Josh, recently about Paolo Banchero, and you went into a player comp, and the player comp that you spent really the most time talking about was Paul Pierce. And that was super interesting to me. And things that you brought up in the video that I really hadn't thought too much about, and type of the similarities, things like that. Can you talk just a little bit about what you touched on in the video and just kind of what makes Paolo and that player comp a reality with Paul Pierce?
Yeah, Pierce was a player in his prime that always deceived his defenders. He didn't have blazing quickness. You never really knew where he was going to end up on the floor, but he always found a way to get to his sweet spots. And if he couldn't get to his sweet spots because the defense was smothering, he would bulldoze his way to the free throw line, or bulldoze his way to the paint, draw the contact, and get to the free throw line. Obviously, we're seeing that with Paolo early in his career. I thought Pierce's movements off the dribble seemed to always fool his defenders. I think there's one play I remember watching. Al Harrington was his defender, of course, former Magic player Al Harrington. Of course, he didn't spend much time in Orlando, but still a former Magic player. You could tell Harrington was locked into trying to contain Pierce in this particular game. And I remember watching the possession, and Pierce just, no matter how smothering Harrington was going to be defensively, Pierce was going to find a way to juke himself away from Harrington, create separation, and hit a step back jumper. That's exactly what he did. It was a huge shot in that game. And I just feel like the movements, the creativity, the craftiness, the size, although Paolo's taller, they both have that similar muscle frame. And I feel like the strength combined with that deceptive quickness is what makes them very similar. And Pierce just, it was always amazing to me how he withstood being that like overpowering athlete, that he didn't have that supreme quickness. He wasn't blazing fast. He didn't necessarily move in a way where you thought he'd be able to blow by his defenders, but he always found a way to deceive them, essentially. And I feel like Paolo is very similar. You know, Paolo does not blow past his defenders very frequently. His blow by percentage was not very high in his rookie year, but he's patient, he's practical, he understands his limitations, and that's exactly what Pierce did throughout the course of his career, particularly in his prime with the Celtics.
Josh, what impressed or stood out the most to you about Franz in year 2?
Well, his catch and shoot three-point shooting got a lot better, especially in the fourth quarter. I think one of the most fascinating stats from this past year was Franz's numbers in the fourth quarter. He was one of the leaders in points in that final frame. And then more importantly, I think it was amongst the top 20 scorers in the fourth quarter this past year. Franz had the best three-point percentage. So he was clutch. He came up big in those pressure-packed moments. He wasn't necessarily given an opportunity to hit a game winner precisely, but it seemed like in those last 5 minutes, he always stepped up. I remember one game against Memphis where he was playing poorly all game. I think he had single-digit points going into like the last 7 minutes, and then he just erupted and gave the Magic a chance to win the game. In fact, it was both times against Memphis, the one in January at home, and then again in Memphis near the end of the season. He did it both times against them. And that, of course, is a physical defense, very difficult to game plan for. They play in the mud. And Franz started wearing them down as the game went along. And I think that's the big thing with Franz. He's so relentless. He never burns out. He tires his defenders out. There's very few players to me that gain more and more energy as the game goes on. And he's one of those guys. It just seems like he has endless energy, and his endurance must be amazing because he just always seems to elevate himself in times when you think they would be exhausted or he would be exhausted. And it's the complete opposite. And then, of course, we know about his footwork on drives, which is very Manu Ginobili-esque. And I still think that's his best comp at this point. I think there's more that Franz can deliver, particularly from a playmaking standpoint, similar to Paolo. But like as far as the driving ability, it's unique at 6'10", you know? I mean, the way he's able to slither through the lane, weave around traffic, and shoot from either hand from any angle is very impressive. The thing he doesn't do, and I saw this number recently and it really like popped in my mind. I'm like, wow, that could be something he can get a lot better in. He does not make floaters well. I think he was second to the bottom. I forget the number of takes as far as a quantity to qualify for this. I think he was second worst in percentage on floaters amongst however many takes. And so the floater game is something that he can get a lot better in. And it's that in-between game he doesn't have. You know, he showcased a little bit early in the year that Dirk Nowitzki one-legged, fadeaway, which I think is kind of part of his repertoire, but it's not consistent. If he could develop a mid-range game or at least a reliable floater, that'll add a lot of scoring elements to his game. But more importantly, just like Paolo, I see a lot of Turkoglu in Franz from a playmaking standpoint. He plays a little with more pace than Turkoglu was amazingly methodical and deliberate. And his camaraderie with Dwight Howard was incredible, which is obviously why they were able to get all the way to the finals, because that duo was so difficult to deal with. And then you had the spacing with Richard and Jameer and Michael Petrus and JJ Redick and all them. But that pick and roll game between Turk and Dwight was incredible. And I see that now. Granted, they're not. I mean, Dwight obviously is far superior than Wendell Carter, but that chemistry between Franz and Wendell is extremely good and getting better. And if you look at the analytics between those two, particularly, it shined above a lot of other duos in the league. And I like the way that they run pick and roll. And of course, Wendell can either pop back, he can flash inside. He's a really good roller. So like that tandem to me is very special. And so Franz, yeah, he's whether I don't know how far he is from his peak, his ceiling. That's the big question with him, because he's a player that we knew coming into the league, having played 2 years at Michigan and having played pro in Germany, we kind of assumed he was a little more advanced than your average rookie last year. The question now is how far is he from his ceiling? And if he's not that far from it, then you're talking about a really special player. If he is close to it, it's still really, really good. He just has to polish up a few things to at least be at that all-star level.
I want to ask you, before we get into like draft prospect stuff and just talking about the draft in general, you talk about Franz and the levels that he can get to, and we talk about that with Paolo all the time, obviously. Where do you think I love to ask this question because everybody answers feels pretty different. On a championship team at their peak, are you comfortable saying what option guy on the team Paolo and Franz would be, really separately, honestly? But it could be on the same team, but you know what I mean? Just like grade them separately, I guess.
It's amazing you asked that question because it's the question I ask myself on an everyday basis, to be completely honest. And this is something that I think every young team is asking themselves. Like, if you're not Denver, if you're not Philadelphia, if you're not Boston, if you're not Miami now, although maybe before the playoffs, we wouldn't have brought them up. There are very few teams where A, you know the pecking order and the hierarchy of your roster, and B, you know you at least have a guy that you can legitimately classify as a tier 1 player. And for me, the way I define tier 1 is top 10. Like, if you're not a top 10 player in the league, you're not tier 1, because tier 1 means you're good enough to be the best player on a championship team. And with the exception of the 2004 Detroit Pistons, we have never seen a team win a championship without having a top 10 player in the league. If Miami wins it, Jimmy Butler has played like a top 10 player throughout these playoffs, but would we classify him as a top 10 player overall? That's debatable. Obviously, Jokic is probably the best player in the league. So they could be an exception if you want to consider Butler outside the top 10, but that's debatable. But every other year, a top, not even just top 10, really, if you think about it, it's like top 5 or top 8 at the worst. So with the Magic, particularly, we can debate all day about Paolo, right? Like, we know he's going to be really, 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 really good. He's already really good. He's almost a certain, I don't know if I want to say a lock, but it's close to a lock in my eyes to being an all-star player, right? I'd be shocked if he didn't make an all-star team. I would expect him to be a perennial all-star. The question from there is, does he reach tier 1 status? And if you feel confident he will, and he's showing signs that he can do that, then everything has to revolve around him. And you have a sort of a hierarchy kind of establishing. Because once you have that tier 1 guy established, you have a key foundation piece locked in, and you can worry about the ancillary pieces subsequently. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just kind of the way that I view it.
How do you view Franz?
Yeah, Franz is really interesting, right? I mean, like I said, comp-wise, I compared him to Manu Ginobili. Ginobili was the 3rd best player on a perennial championship contender. Of course, he was a 6-man mostly on the Spurs, but his contributions were more immense than that. I've always felt like his best, if he's your 3rd best player, I feel really, 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 really good. 2nd best player is where, it's tough to determine right now. He's still really young. I think there's a chance in today's NBA with his skill type, he could theoretically be the 2nd best player on a fringe championship team. How about that? I don't know if the defense is in order, and of course the Magic are all about defensive principles and building an identity on that end of the floor, then to me, it changes things, because if you're a top 5 defense, as Miami traditionally generally is, you can kind of get away with not necessarily being the most potent offensive team. And Franz is a 2-way player. So if he's contributing at a high level defensively, and he's giving you bits and pieces offensively and shooting at a high clip, well, that may be plenty to be the 2nd best player. The likelihood, just based on general logic, is that 3rd best player feels right, but it's still too early to make those kinds of determinations, in my opinion.
The most recent examples, because Luke and I have had this conversation a few different times, and we kind of fall on different sides of the fences here. I look at the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks, their 2nd best player being Chris Middleton. I look at the 2019 Toronto Raptors, their 2nd best player being Pascal Siakam. But to your point, both of those teams were borderline elite defensively. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at, that Franz could be your second best player if your team is also just all around sound defensively.
Yes. And again, the ancillary pieces are critical because, like you mentioned, those Milwaukee and Toronto teams, they just had the right ancillary pieces around. In Milwaukee's case, Giannis and Middleton, Drew Holiday, if you want to throw him in there as well. And then, of course, in Toronto, with, in addition to Kawhi Leonard and Siakam, Van Fleet, Lowry, and Marc Gasol, it just felt like there wasn't a weak link on any of those rosters for the most part. But more importantly, and this is why this draft to me is very critical for the Magic, is my estimation. Miami is a great example. Denver is unique, but they're proving to be far better as far as defensive versatility than they were in the regular season. I think in the playoffs, they've elevated their play defensively. I think it's critical to not have any defensive liabilities on the floor. We're in an era now where in positionless basketball, size is a huge factor. Being able to guard multiple positions and length has never been more important, because at every position, guys are getting longer. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not really seeing ball dominant guards control the league anymore. Guys under 6'5", and unless they're elite shot makers like Jamal Murray, Jalen Brunson, I categorize them differently than I would other point guards because they are just straight up tough shot makers. They are bucket getters at their positions, but they're not the ones really completely controlling the flow of the offense. Brunson does a little more than Murray, but of course in Denver, it's Jokic's show. Julius Randle handles a lot of the orchestrating in New York. But my point is we're not seeing the traditional point guards dominate the game that they may have years back. And I'm not going to suggest that those players aren't great. John Morant, Kyrie Irving, et cetera, et cetera. They are great players. But right now, the best teams, by and large, great defensively, super long, positionless. You can keep switching in every situation. It's what makes Boston so special, even though they fell short of their goal. They're obviously an elite team. They switch everything, and it makes it so hard to crack them defensively. I mean, they've been top 10 in defense ever since Brad Stevens really took over, but now Missoula's doing, he's more of an offensive-minded guy, but they're still an elite defense. I think they finished second in defense this year.
Josh, if you take out, let's kind of shift gears toward the draft at this point. If you take out in this draft, I want to talk guards really right now. If you take out Scoot Henderson and you take out Amen Thompson, so then that, would you say that first, it's really, this is the initial question to a follow-up. Would you say that Ausar Thompson is better than, in your eyes, Anthony Black, Keontae George, Cason Wallace?
So my opinion is George's skill set, to me, in today's NBA, I see him as a potential spark plug off the bench. That's my estimation of him. He looks like a shot hunter, not so much a shot creator. We spoke to him at the combine. Obviously, he thinks his facilitating is improving each and every day. I didn't necessarily see that at Baylor, but he is electric in situations. He feels like a hot and cold player. He's kind of erratic. He just feels like your classic six man. That's just my eyes, whether it's Jordan Clarkson, whether it's, you can name a lot of different guys. Lou Williams in his prime. Obviously, he's no longer a part of the league, but Jordan Poole is another one that he reminds me of, maybe Cam Thomas. I feel like he's in that ballpark. Those are really nice players. I'm just not convinced you can really rely on them in a starting role consistently, especially defensively. And then as far as spacing, George, I think, shot 33% from three at Baylor, something along those lines, which for a guard in today's NBA is a little lower than what I would like. Not to say he can't elevate that, because he certainly could. And he had some stretches I remember watching where he caught fire. I mean, he was electric in situations. So back to your question, really, I know I'm kind of like dancing around it a little bit. Ausar Thompson's skill set, minus the competition he played against, because we really don't know what he is. The fact that he played against that competition with Overtime Elite, it's nice on paper. I just wish I could have seen more against more stiffer competition. That's my only thing on him. I just don't know what he is against the very elite. What I see is quick hands, great at getting in the passing lanes, stifling on-ball defender from an isolation standpoint, and very good in transition. I think they've been reporting that his shot making from the perimeter in workouts has been better than advertised, but we don't know what it would be like in NBA games. I don't see an on-ball guy as far as offensively with Ausar. I see someone standing in a corner, the wing, waiting for kickouts. The spray out pass is the most important pass in the NBA. It opens up the best three-point looks. If Ausar can knock down threes consistently, then yeah, he's a terrific role player. A terrific ancillary piece, as I kind of alluded to before about ancillary pieces. Because I think he's going to bring it defensively with the length, the quickness, the athleticism, the verticality too, because I feel like he's a little bit of a slasher too, where he can catch lobs, sneaking in from the baseline, for example. But I'm not expecting him to be a creator, unlike his brother, who obviously is going to have the ball in his hands a ton wherever he goes. So I'm kind of all over the place with Ausar Thompson, maybe simply because we just didn't see him against true competition. So I'm trying not to really rank these guys so much. It's more of their skill sets. What do they bring to the table that matches today's NBA? I think Ausar, if he's a home run, he kind of does match. I feel like he's kind of like an Andre Iguodala in the sense that his defensive versatility is really, really impressive based on his length, his athleticism, his size, his quickness. All of those elements would obviously usually result in someone being able to guard multiple positions. It's all about the shooting, because I'm not expecting him to be an on-ball creator offensively. So take it for, you kind of have to analyze it for yourself, what you think is most important. But that's how I kind of view him. I think you mentioned a couple other guys, but I'm kind of digressing a little bit.
No, you're good. Yeah, just the other two.
Anthony Black. You did mention
Anthony Black and Anthony Black and Cason Wallace. But
Yeah,
you don't have to get too deep into those. But yeah, just curious how they kind of stack up against the other two.
Anthony Black to me plays a lot like Josh Giddey. I think there's a little bit of Austin Reeves there. They're similar in the sense that they have that nice footwork, the stop and go game. They also do a really good job manipulating defenders with their various movements. Of course, Anthony Black did not shoot it well from three. He's a very good facilitator. Again, he's 6'7", so he's got great length. Question is, as a guard, assuming he plays the guard position, and I know Giddey, if that's his best comp, Giddey plays in a very unconventional system in OKC. Giddey's playing like three or four different positions, like every other, every time down the floor, he's either playing 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's like impossible to predict how he's going to be placed. But Giddey plays really well off the ball because he's a good cutter. I don't know if Anthony Black can play off the ball. Like he's not a spot up shooter. I didn't see cutting in his game, but with the ball in his hands, he's crafty and he's got great vision. If you're thinking about the Magic situation, do you need a guy like that? That's debatable. I don't know. And then as far as Wallace, so I've seen the Drew Holiday and Marcus Smart comps, and those are fine. But like what I see, Cason Wallace seems a lot smaller than those guys. Now, I don't know what his listed height is in front of me. I think it's 6'3". He looks more like Davion Mitchell to me. Davion Mitchell's a really good defender, but he lacks size. And while I think Cason averaged 4.3 assists at Kentucky this past year, which is nice, I'm not convinced he's your primary facilitator. And I just don't see him as a scorer. So he's going to hustle. He's going to play with energy. He's going to come up with a lot of steals. The steal game is his best strength. I wouldn't be surprised if he ranks top 10 in steals if he's playing big minutes for whatever team he goes to. But if you have him on the floor in big moments, can you rely on him off the ball to hit threes, open threes, kick out threes? I just don't see him creating for himself. His facilitating's fine, but is the ball really going to be in his hands in those critical moments? Especially if he's with the Magic, you got Paolo, you got Franz, you got Markelle, so forth and so on. So defensively, he's going to bring it though. I mean, he's definitely going to add some elements to a team's defensive identity for sure.
Which prospects in this draft do you see as being the best fits for the Magic?
Well, I'm a huge fan of the defensive versatility like I brought up earlier. I know everybody now is raving about Coulibaly. He's the big riser right now. And I could see why. I mean, the Clips, again, we don't know. I know that's better competition than what, Overtime Elite was doing, but it's all coming up really recently. Like, we didn't really see any of this earlier in the year because everybody's eyes was on Wembanyama, and Bilal was not even playing that much early in the year. But these last several games have just been quite startling. Now he's listed, I think it's 6'7", but he's got a 7'2" wingspan, if what I read is correct. Defense looks off the charts. I mean, his length just interferes with everything. He's good putting the ball on the deck, getting to the basket. I saw he finished with his left hand a few times, which at his age is quite impressive. But he's another one that has shown no touch from the outside. If he can't hit spot-up threes, I mean, honestly, he's probably Matisse Thybulle, right? I mean, he's in that boat. He's in that category. If he starts hitting threes, particularly, it opens up a whole load of potential for him. I've heard the Giannis comp, but Giannis is also like 7 feet tall, right? Unless he grows. I mean, I heard that he's only 18, right? So maybe he grows more and he's 6'10" by the time he reaches the NBA. Who knows? But maybe that's a little too quick to grow 3 inches. But he has a Giannis element to his game, but Giannis is just incredibly long, incredibly powerful. He got so chiseled that you could have never foreseen that coming. I mean, Giannis would not be the player he is now if he didn't bulk up the way he did. Most players can't do that. We saw that with Dwight Howard. That's a rarity. No matter how much time they spend in the gym lifting weights, I don't care. Very few guys are going to get to that level from a physical standpoint. We can't expect, Bilal to do that, right? So if he can't do that, and he's a few inches shorter than Giannis, I have a hard time believing he could be that. But very impressive from an intangible standpoint and defensive versatility standpoint. So I think he could fit. And then you have those other versatile fours and small ball fives and Taylor Hendricks. Cam Whitmore's more of a 3, but he guards multiple positions really quick. The more I watch Cam Whitmore, the more I see Jaylen Brown. I thought Miles Bridges was his best comp for a while, which it might still be. But I'm starting to see more Jaylen Brown in his game. So quick off the dribble. I mean, Jaylen Brown had one of the best blow-by percentages in the league the last couple years. His ball handling obviously is not great, which was his criticism in the playoffs. But Whitmore's ball handling isn't great. He's a little uncoordinated when he puts the ball on the floor. But a nice spot-up jump shooter. We just don't know if he can create for himself or for others when the ball's in his hands. But as far as like hardcore defense, spot-up shooting, slashing, finishing with authority at the basket, Whitmore obviously has what it takes to be a really good pro. And then Hendricks, to me, is just a larger body, really long. Reminds me a little bit of a Jonathan Isaac as far as if he reaches his – I mean, I know Isaac's been hurt, but if Isaac wasn't hurt, we know what he can be. So I kind of compared the two of them a little bit. And, Hendricks surprised me as well because his shooting was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. So great shot blocker too. Elite rim protector. I think Whitmore has better foot speed if you're comparing the two. So I feel like all these guys fit in, but I'm focused specifically in this situation on those versatile defensive types, the 3s, 4s, and 5s who can guard multiple positions. That's always what I value at this stage in today's NBA. But it doesn't mean any of the guards can't end up shining way above those guys. I mean, we mentioned a few of them, whether it's Anthony Black, Keontae George, Nick Smith Jr., he's another one. I feel like all of them have potential to be really, really good pros.
Josh, we'll kind of leave with this. Can you give us your best prediction on where the Magic end up in the standings next season?
Wow. Boy, I wish I knew what the roster exactly was going to look like. But,
yeah.
I mean, they won 12 more games last year, obviously, than the year before, which was a great improvement, best in the Eastern Conference. I'm expecting Paolo to get, if not substantially better, at least reasonably better, rationally better, maybe is a better way to put it. Like, you have to figure with all the work he puts in, he's going to get better. We just don't know to what extent, especially going from year 1 to 2. Usually it's year 3 when we see the guys make their biggest jump. But I do expect him to get better in key areas. They're still a very young team, so we'll see what Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs can deliver going into their following years. I still think you want to say playing tournament at the minimum, right? I mean, that would be a realistic, reasonable goal. Of course, I want to. Let's see what some of these other Eastern Conference teams do in the offseason, because I feel like some of these teams are going to start shaking things up. I'm not confident in some of those teams that were in the play-in tournament or just were barely in the playoffs. I feel like have kind of reached their tipping point. Like, what's Atlanta going to do, right? Like, we don't know with Trae Young's situation. Are they considering trading him? I know they didn't make the playoffs, but like, is Charlotte going to completely rebuild now? I mean, granted, they were below us in the standings. I just feel like there's a number of teams that could completely change their direction, which then could elevate the Magic, because maybe some of those teams decide they want to rebuild, retool, and they're going to fall back in the standings. Whether it's, Atlanta, obviously Chicago's another big one. What they do with DeMar DeRozan, Vucevic is a free agent. So like, there's a lot of scenarios there where I think certain teams that were above the Magic could fall back, which would obviously help the Magic rise. But just from, improvement standpoint within, I think play-in tournament should be a realistic goal. And then 7-8 seed, I think is certainly possible for sure. And then give whoever they play in the first round a little run for their money for sure. Maybe do what Miami did.
Well, that would be fantastic. But at least, at like the very least, the Magic should be hosting at least one play-in game next year. Like, even if you're the 8 and you lose and you're well, I mean, if you're the 7-8 game and you win, then I guess you're in. But if you lose, you would host the winner of 9-10. But Josh, thanks so much for joining the show, man. Always good to talk to you. For those that don't know, can you let everyone know where they can find your work?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter at Josh_Cohen_NBA. The same with YouTube. And so, you can find me in those. And also OrlandoMagic.com, of course. That's where all my writing exists. So you can find articles on there.
Yeah, be sure to check out Josh's YouTube channel. Not only Orlando Magic, but like a lot of general NBA stuff. Like you did a Jeremy, Sohan like season review, which I thought was really cool. So again, thanks Josh for taking the time, man. Always good talking to you. And yeah, we're looking forward to this next Magic season.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on.
Another big thanks to Josh for joining the show. Always appreciate his insight. And our buddy Dan Savage always tells me that nobody watches more basketball than Josh Cohen. And I think that is legitimately a fact.
Yeah, and listening to him talk about, there was one point where I fact-checked him behind the scenes just to see, because I had a feeling he was completely right.
Don't trust Josh.
Oh, no, I trust him. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes. He said, he just flippantly mentioned Cason Wallace, and he was like, yeah, he does such and such. He played at Kentucky. The average, I think, like 4.3 dimes. And so I pulled it up real quick. I rushed to my basketball reference. Sure enough, he averages 4.3 assists. I expected them to maybe be off by a tenth of a point. The guy was spot on. He's super knowledgeable. We say this about our guests all the time when it comes to draft stuff, but Josh is clearly, research has been put in. He, like you said, he doesn't just watch the Magic. This guy is tuned into anything and everything NBA related, prospect related, whatever it might be, and it shows. So shout out to Josh Cohen.
All right, that's really going to do it for this one. Don't forget, again, that post-game show is coming after every regular season game. Our good buddy, our bestie, producer Kevin Tucker. For those of you, this is a great day for the folks that are like, we need more producer Kevin. You're going to get a lot more producer Kevin next season. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to the Orlando Magic draft party coming up on June 22nd. Doors open at 6:30. The draft is going to start at 7 o'clock. Be sure to go into your Orlando Magic app or to orlandomagic.com to reserve your free tickets. And in preparation for the post-game show next season, go to our YouTube right now, youtube.com/the6man show. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Ring the notification bell. If you're watching this video, go ahead and comment, like, all that good stuff. It all helps the algorithm. Y'all know how it works. Anything else, gentlemen, before we go ahead and wrap this up?
I don't know how it works, but please, yes, like and comment. Get us to the top of everything.
In a general sense, everyone knows that the algorithm is what gets the content out there into the deep interwebs. It's all about the engagement, folks. But for producer Kevin, for Luke Sylvia, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to the 6-Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya. Thanks for listening to the 6th Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!